Hello. So today we are going to be looking at Judith Butler's Gender Trouble. This book can be regarded as one of the most provocative and discipline-altering books ever written in social theory. This book brings into being the discipline of queer theory and actually unsettles the very subject of feminism, the category of woman. Let me read out very briefly what Judith Butler herself has to say about Gender Trouble. She writes, "In 1989, I was most concerned to criticize a pervasive heterosexual assumption in feminist theory. I sought to counter those views that made presumptions about the limits and propriety of gender and restricted the meaning of gender to received notions of masculinity and femininity. The aim of this text is to open up the field of possibility, for gender without dictating which kinds of possibilities ought to be realized." So really the idea also of queerness, of that openness, of the openness of possibilities, of the various permutations and combinations and directions being possible is what this book enabled us to do. So let us dive into what and how she talks about in the book. I first want to present who are the influences or who are those that she is in conversation with as she's writing Gender Trouble. Judith Butler is a distinguished professor in the Department of Comparative Literature at the University of California, Berkeley, and her work has been very influential in a wide range of fields. And as you see here, she draws upon a wide range of scholars from several different disciplines in order to come up with critical social theory, critical feminist theory, and what then came to be known as queer theory. Butler does not emerge in isolation. A work like this also cannot be confined to one discipline. It is interdisciplinary, and one could also argue that it is post-disciplinary. So in this slide, I've put up the various scholars that she is in theoretical conversations with in Gender Trouble. From Claude Levi-Strauss takes structuralism, the idea that meaning is relational and not something intrinsic to the subject. From Michel Foucault, she takes the insight that power can be productive and it is not merely repressive. Jacques Lacan and Julia Kristeva shape her understanding of language, desire, and the symbolic order. Judith Butler herself acknowledges in her preface, and I will read out, Gail Rubin's extraordinary work on gender, sexuality, and kinship, Esther Newton's groundbreaking work on drag, Monique Wittig's brilliant theoretical and fictional writings, Witting's argument that the category of sex is, under the conditions of compulsory heterosexuality, always feminine, the masculine remain being the unmarked. The binary restriction on sex serves the reproductive aims of a system of compulsory heterosexuality. So Butler's originality lies in bringing these seemingly diverse set of thinkers together into this text that, like I said, unsettles the subject of feminism. I've listed a few works by Judith Butler in this text. Gender Trouble is the one that we are looking at in this lecture. Subjects of Desire shows her Hegelian roots. This kind of comes from her doctoral thesis also. Bodies That Matter was a corrective to Gender Trouble, which was critiqued for not having enough materiality, although Butler would defend that because the idea of Gender Trouble is about performativity. The body is central to her notions that she brings up in Gender Trouble, and she corrects that in Bodies That Matter. Her later works, Undoing Gender, Precarious Life, Frames of War, and The Force of Nonviolence, basically extend her thinking towards ethics, vulnerability, and violence. Primarily, what is consistent, like the consistent thread in Butler's work, is the idea of how norms shape who can appear as an intelligible subject. The title of the book is Gender Trouble, and Butler here really autobiographically looks at the idea of trouble, and trouble in a relationship with power, where power does not suppress trouble but manages it. She reminds us that trouble is often framed negatively as disorder, as rebellion, as failure. Butler reclaims trouble as a condition for power. Power does not eliminate trouble, it manages it, producing norms that promise stability and constantly generating exclusions. Butler says that she originally took the clue on how to read the performity of gender from Jacques Derrida, especially his story Before the Law. There, the one who sits for the law, sits before the door of the law, attributes a certain force to the law for which one waits, and through that waiting, through that anticipation, creates the law. So the anticipation conjures the object. Let us read from her text. I really like these two troublesome paragraphs from Gender Trouble. Contemporary feminist debates over the meaning of gender lead time and again to a certain sense of trouble, as if the indeterminacy of gender might eventually culminate in the failure of feminism. Perhaps trouble need not carry such a negative valence. To make trouble was, within the reigning discourses of my childhood, something one should never do precisely because that would get one in trouble. The rebellion and its reprimand seemed to be caught up in the same terms, a phenomena that gave rise to my first critical insight into the subtle ruse of power. The prevailing law threatened one with trouble, even put one in trouble, all to keep one out of trouble. Here I concluded that trouble is inevitable and the task how best to make it and the best way to be in it. Then she asks, what configuration of power constructs the subject, and the other, what binary relation between men and women and the internal stability of these terms? What resolution is there here at work? Are those terms untroubling only to the extent that they conform to a heterosexual matrix for conceptualizing gender and desire? What best way to trouble the gender categories that support gender hierarchy and compulsory heterosexuality? So here the key question that Butler is trying to pose is that what configurations of power create the binary of male and female, men and women, and how are these norms produced and who benefits from it? So feminism assumes the woman as the subject, but Butler is asking us to pause and take a critical look, apply the tools of feminist theory to the subject of feminist theory and try to understand what and how is the category of woman or man produced. What language, representational techniques, law, politics and systems create these categories. She writes, feminist critique ought also to understand how the category of woman, the subject of feminism, is produced and restrained by the very structures of power through which emancipation is sought. The presumed universality and unity of the subject of feminism is effectively undermined by the constraints of the representational discourse in which it functions. Indeed, the premature insistence on a stable subject of feminism, understood as a seamless category of woman, inevitably generates multiple refusals to accept the category. These domains of exclusion reveal the coercive and regulatory consequences of that construction, even when the construction has been elaborated for emancipatory purposes. Here again, we can look at Derrida's Before the Law, where waiting for the law, anticipating the law, is actually producing the idea of law or the object law in the narrative, in that story. So feminism's subject, the very power that produces the category of woman, is being asked by feminist theory to emancipate, right? So that's the conundrum that she is putting forth to us. Here, this is the Hegelian Butler coming in front of us, also drawing from Marx. In terms of the methodology, she's here trying to come to a genealogy of the category of woman. And she writes, obviously, the political task is not to refuse representational politics as if we could. The juridical structures of language and politics constitute the contemporary field of power. Hence, there is no position outside this field, but only a critical genealogy of its own legitimating practices. As such, the critical point of departure is the historical present, as Marx put it. And the task is to formulate within this constituted time a critique of the categories of identity that contemporary juridical structures engender, naturalize, and immobilize. So how does the law frame gender categories, and how does that framing create illusion of this being the normal, this being the only possibility? So this slide puts Judith Butler in conversation with feminist theories, particularly ideas of sex and gender. It usually was considered or is considered that sex is biological sex, something that you're born with, that is natural and is kind of given. And based on that, gender is socially constructed. So certain ideas of femininity map onto the female body and masculinity maps onto the male body. But let's read what feminist scholars have to say about the sex-gender binary. Simone de Beauvoir in 1949 told us, one is not born but rather becomes a woman. So in 1949, she is recognizing how the category of woman, the gendered category of woman, is socially constructed. Then Gail Rubin, in 1975, The Traffic in Sex, tells us sex is sex, but what counts as sex is culturally determined. So she destabilizes even what was taken as the natural category of sex. Then Joan Scott in 1986, Gender, a Useful Category of Historical Analysis, writes, gender is a constitutive element of social relationships based on perceived differences between the sexes. Judith Butler writes, if gender is the cultural meanings that the sexed body assumes, then a gender cannot be said to follow from a sex in any one way, right? So culturally one could construct a body in any which way. Taken to its logical limit, the sex-gender distinction suggests a radical discontinuity between sexed bodies and culturally constructed agents. Then Judith Butler writes, bodies do not come into this world fully formed. So bodies are interpreted, they are classified, they are regulated. Just as the baby is born, the first question, or even before the baby is born, the first question is it a boy or a girl? So that very act is socially creating even biological sex. We know of babies born that are intersexed, or babies born with organs and hormones and bodily parts not quite fitting in exactly into one particular biological sex, and then surgeries are performed. So the medical profession, the legal profession, other regulatory organizations or institutions, and the family as an institution becomes sites through which both sex and gender are constructed. This is one of Judith Butler's most cited sentences and also sometimes misunderstood. She writes, there is no gender identity behind the expressions of gender. That identity is performatively constituted by the very expressions that are said to be its results. So the repeated performances, repeated acts, repeated ways in which we behave like a woman or behave like a man or are told to do so, all of that congeal, in her words, to produce the feeling that this is a natural man or woman. She writes, gender is the repeated stylization of the body, a set of repeated acts within a highly rigid regulatory frame. This highly rigid regulatory frame is very important, because she is not here saying that we are all performing, that we are acting our gender all the time quite consciously. Note the difference between the terms performance and performativity. She is arguing for a performativity which are repeated acts, but these are within a regulatory frame. These are within the norms that are surrounding us, right? These are within the received notions of what it means to be a man and a woman. So there is a framework within which the performance is happening. I'll repeat. Gender is the repeated stylization of the body, a set of repeated acts within a highly rigid regulatory frame that congeal over time to produce the appearance of substance of a natural sort of being. So all of these acts together, every day, somebody is acting coy, you are acting vulnerable, one is acting emotionally fraught or available or empathetic and docile, and maybe certain notions of femininity come forth through these words, right? So these things congeal over time to produce a natural sort of being. Gender performativity is not a matter of choosing what gender one will be today. Performativity is a matter of reiterating or repeating the norms through which one is constituted. That is why gender is a verb. It is created, it is produced through the very acts that are supposed to be its results. I originally took my clue on how to read the performativity of gender from Jacques Derrida's reading of Kafka's Before the Law. There the one who waits for the law, sits before the door of the law, attributes a certain force to the law for which one waits. The anticipation conjures its object. This is what happens even in gender. It is these acts, it is the repeatedness of these acts that conjure up the notion of what it means to be a woman. So M. Butterfly, I think, quite nicely exemplifies what we're talking about when we say that gender is repeated acts, it's a performativity. M. Butterfly is a play by David Henry Hwang, adapted from a film, Madame Butterfly. And the film is primarily about a French diplomat who falls in love with a Chinese opera singer, without knowing that the person whom he finds so beautiful, so feminine, and the perfect woman. In fact, there's a dialogue in the play about the perfect woman, docile, beautiful, caring, dainty, all of that is actually biologically male, but putting up the act of being a woman. There is a sentence in the play about who knows, I'm not framing it exactly as it is, but the idea was one of the actors saying that nobody knows better about how to be a woman than a man. So it's these ideas, it is these notions, it is these repeated stylizations, these actions that produce the notion of being a woman. Now this idea that the gender is a script and it can be performed also opens up the field of possibilities. Along with ideas of femininity, the stereotypical ideas of femininity, the script that is performed, there are also ideas of the Oriental woman, intersectional category here that is being performed, that of the submissive Oriental woman, Asian woman, as somebody who is docile and timid and pretty because of her shyness. She writes, paradoxically, the reconceptualization of identity as an effect, that is, as produced or generated, opens up possibilities of agency that are insidiously foreclosed by positions that take identity categories as foundational and fixed. So this is a very liberating way also to think about gender. For an identity to be an effect means that it is neither fatally determined nor fully artificial and arbitrary. But there are many permutations and combinations possible. And the idea of drag that she speaks about towards the end of her book, of where gender is performed in a heightened manner, shows us that possibility. In fact, drag acts as that theoretical lens which shows us that gender is not something that is inherent, that is inside us, that is fixed, but that it is a field of possibilities and can be performed. While the drag is attempting to imitate, they are also showing that the imitation itself is an imitation. One of Judith Butler's most famous claim is that drag is a parody. It is not a parody of what is the true gender underneath. It's a parody that reveals that there was no true gender to begin with. That really does trouble the subject of feminist theory, but it opens up a field of possibilities.